Yeah, there it is. Greetings from Groningen. Really good. So first, we're going to start with a Q&A with Milen van Boldrik. She has worked as an advocate for the Dutch Association of Journalists, the NVJ, for almost 8 years now, and campaigning to fair and transparent working conditions for freelance journalists. You can also see her here live in action. I have some slides which I also will share via my video stream. Um, Milen, welcome.
Yeah, thank
Great
you.
that you're here.
Yes.
Good to see you again. You also attended for a really short contribution in our previous webinar on living pay. And
Yeah.
really nice now to have time to really dive deep into the
Yes.
case you have, because I think they're really inspiring and lots to learn for many. So great that you're here.
Thank you.
Um, can you maybe describe a bit also the market of freelance journalism in Netherlands? So what is the context where we're talking about?
Yeah, the context for the self-employed journalist is a bit of a hard one because the negotiation position for the freelance journalist is difficult because there are only basically two companies in the Netherlands that own everything in journalism, basically. So two companies that have all the newspapers, the magazines, even TV production, and so the market is very concentrated. So that means that if you, as a self-employed journalist, really want to make a point and do not wish to work for less than a certain amount you have in your head, that is fair. You do risk losing a really big client if you don't comply with the demands of the client in journalism. So that makes the negotiation position of self-employed journalists really difficult because there are not so many options. There are just two big companies and then the public television companies that also provide work for self-employed journalists. So
Hmm.
that makes it difficult. And what we saw for a long time from the early 2000s up till now is that the tariffs were going down and down and down for the self-employed. So at the beginning of 2000, at the end of, let's say, 2017, 18, we really started to, yeah, strategize an idea to shift this and make the negotiation position for the self-employed journalist better. So we've been doing this for quite some long time.
Yeah, so what I hear from you, it takes time, and the fact that there are just two big clients is a disadvantage for the worker, but maybe a advantage for unions to negotiate, because it's quite clear who you need to talk to, right?
That is true, and I must say, for our the negotiations for our collective labor agreements, it is quite handy because we have one big collective labor agreement for the employees. So you sit with the two companies on your negotiation table, but there was always, I mean, times are changing now because I don't know if how it's everywhere, but now it's kind of common to include some tariff discussion on the collective labor agreement table for the self-employed. But 10 years ago, it was really not done to negotiate for the self-employed. It was just thought of, no, they have to do it themselves. They are their own businesses. So that was really something we had to overcome to say, like, no, maybe they are self-employed, but obviously the negotiation position is not strong enough to get a fair tariff. So that was the beginning of the whole discussion, and we had to overcome a lot of opposition, of course, from the big publishers.
Hmm. Yes, because they had a interest to defend, of course, which
Absolutely, yeah.
sounds
Which
logical.
was quite handy, the low tariffs.
Yeah, yeah, but I can imagine that's also has quite some similarities also with the gig economy markets, where the supply and demand, they're really fragmented, but in the end there are just a couple of big platforms. So these are also the stakeholders to discuss and to enforce and also regulate in that. And can you also maybe tell me a bit about the journey you had to get in the end to the legally enforceable minimum tariff for
Yeah.
self-employed journalists?
Yes, of course. Well, the thing was that at the beginning, we're just talking with the big clients, with the big publishers, just talking brought us actually nowhere. So unfortunately, they just said to us, no, we're not going to negotiate anything for the self-employed. They should do it themselves. So we had to come up with a strategy to basically force them to talk with us about the tariffs for the self-employed. And the way we did that is actually to organize the workers, so the self-employed and the employees, because the employees in journalism do have quite of a good collective agreement with great protection, a fair wage. So they have a pretty strong position on the labor market. But in journalism, there are also a lot of self-employed journalists, and they work the same positions more or less, but with way less pay and way less protection. So the idea was, if we bring on board the workers with the good protection to advocate for their colleagues with less protection, we can make actually quite a good statement, because then we have the whole working force behind the self-employed, and then you cannot deny anymore the discussion. So that's actually what we did. We organized the workers and said, like, if you don't like advocate for the self-employed, you employee, you might in the future have the same not so great working conditions that the self-employed journalist had. And I must say, this is not something that happened overnight. It is something that really we built over the years. And you see a picture now. This is actually a protest in front of the big publishers company entrance, where the employees and the self-employed really stood together and said, no, it's now time to give everyone a fair raise, not only the employees, but also the self-employed. And it was actually more like enforced for the self-employed. People really thought their tariffs have been lacking so much. It's not fair anymore. We really should do something about it. So that was actually a great vibe. So you have to kind of you have to build the solidarity. For us, that was the solution to this problem. Build solidarity so the clients are kind of forced to talk with you. Otherwise, the unrest on the floor is way too big. And that was actually the stepping stone in going to the table and negotiating about a tariff, like a minimum tariff. I must say there were some way we also had to go to court for it, but it's like a multiple way thing. So build solidarity, try in courts to enforce some agreements, and slowly but surely we built a fair practice code with an enforceably minimum tariff.
And how could you manage to make it also enforceable by law? Because because normally tariffs they're quite they're no strings attached. Also, let's so it also needs to be the decision of the employer to
Definitely.
implement. So how that?
Well, actually, we just made it part of like we made it part of the collective labor agreement. So in that sense, it is not just just saying like, oh, we're willing to pay it, but it's actually the minimum tariff is forcible, and if not, you can go to our union and ask one of the lawyers to enforce it. So that just so you have to make it kind of a formal agreement. So if you say like, this is the tariff, this is the minimum tariff, like think of a way to formalize this deal. And a way to formalize labor agreements deal is to kind of make them part of the collective labor agreement. So it's a
And
separate thing, but the same mechanics are in place.
yes, interesting in that. And so how then in the end did you calculate the minimum tariff? So what were the considerations? Because in the end, a tariff is always imperfect because there are always things within and things are not in the tariff.
Absolutely.
And it's also a minimum, a floor. which can also be the danger of being a benchmark for all tariffs. So how did you calculate it, and how did you also took into consideration the other variables?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is always difficult to get to a really good tariff, but basically we do a lot of countries, and we also have it in the journalism collective labor agreement. You do have a benchmark in the sector, and that is the collective labor agreement for employees. So we took that and thought like, what do you need to add so a self-employed person can pay their pension, the disability, and all those things that come with it. So we came up with like a number, and that is 170%, so 170% of the regular wage of an employee. And actually, it's not perfect because we did this a couple of years ago now, 2020. We started to calculate this, and looking back, I think we need to have a higher percentage because, but it's always the end of a negotiation. So for us, it was 170%. Then you can, as a self-employed person, get your pension and your disability. But in fairness, I think it should even be higher because you also have your payable hours and your acquisition. So it is not perfect, but I think a starting point is always to think it needs to be way more than the regular payment of employees. So at least 50% more, 150%, and then keep adding till the negotiation basically stops. So for us, it was around 170% of a regular payment for an employee in journalism.
Yes,
Does it make sense, all those numbers?
yes, it does make sense. So,
Yeah.
so in the end, the 70% on top of the wage in the collective agreement for employed workers for this special function is mostly based on negotiations and not really on, okay, so what are, let's say, the occupation related costs of the worker. So it's the result of a negotiation
Yeah.
with the employers, the two
But
employers.
yeah, but I want to say, like, if you're a union or listening now and you need to calculate this amount, start as high as possible, of course, because in all fairness, it is pretty difficult for a self-employed person to have build a really good pension from just a tariff. So the higher, the better. But I think we'll all agree on that.
Yes, I also agree, and that's
Yeah.
being also a freelancer myself. And do you also differentiate in different experience levels
Yeah.
of experience?
Well, I must say the minimum tariff is just basically a minimum tariff saying this is the stepping point that you cannot go under as a client. And so we advocated as it is absolute the minimum, the starting point for starters in journalism that just come from school, are very young. And going up from there, we do have a benchmark for if you experience 3 years, 6 years, 10 years. But in all fairness, that's also a negotiation outcome for the journalists themselves. Yeah, you see here that in an ideal world, this is what we actually tell our self-employed journalist what you should get. So for a meteor journalist, it is, around let's say 60 euros an hour. That's quite high. Our experience is that it is difficult for journalists to get this hourly tariff, but we keep telling them this is what it should be. But in the end, it's always the outcome of a negotiation. And as I told you at the beginning of this conversation, the negotiation position is quite difficult in the Netherlands for journalists because the market is so concentrated.
Yes. Oh, I will switch back to my camera. And so, can you also give any insight in the current discussions you have, and also maybe also within in the current government regulations discussions about self-employment in general in Netherlands?
Yeah, absolutely. I maybe want to add that forming a good minimum tariff or like a good agreement for the self-employed, it's never a single project. So I told you about the solidarity aspect that you need. It's really handy if you can organize all workers for this cause. But on the sideline, so we also went to courts, but also on the sideline, we always lobbied with politicians that they should have better laws for the self-employed. Because 10 years ago in the Netherlands, self-employed freelancers had strict regulation about tariffs and how if they could discuss it with each other. Basically, self-employed workers were seen as a multinational by the government, which was ridiculous because they don't have the same position. But that was the law. So we as a union, but I know with us other unions in the Netherlands, kept lobbying to loosen those rules for the self-employed. And that also helped to make agreements on other tables. So we're now in 2026 and we have a new government in the Netherlands, and in the new laws that they're planning to enroll next year is also like a minimum tariff for the whole country. Well, it's not exactly a minimum tariff, but it is like an how can I explain this? It is like a tariff that if you go under the tariff, you're probably not a self-employed person, but the risk is for the client and not for the self-employed person. And I think this is a step forward. So my takeaway from that is always keep your eyes on the prize and never forget the politicians when you're doing your lobby work to advocate for the self-employed, because I think in the end this is a good step forward.
Yeah, so really this multi-angle stakeholder whatever approach, and also the example of Netherlands, but also I think also within the European Platform Work Directive about the legal presumption where not the worker needs to prove, hey, I'm self-employed, but the company needs to prove that you are not employed.
Exactly.
Which make a big difference also in the debates, and I think also really for the sector of journalists. And what kind of discussion do you also have with your members themselves? Is everybody happy with it, or is there also critique? So what are the thoughts about that?
There's always I see. Is there something in the chat or?
No,
Oh,
not yet, not yet.
okay.
But feel free to post your questions here.
Sorry, Martijn, can you repeat the last question one more time?
Yeah, so what are the discussions you have with your members on this tariff? So what makes them happy? What's critique do they have? So how does this ongoing discussion look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, not everyone is super happy, of course, with a minimum tariff because, as always, such is life. You have journalists, self-employed journalists with a very good negotiation position, but it's a smaller group. But we have good discussions with them because they say, like, we're afraid that the benchmark is going to be the regular tariff. And of course, that's always a risk that companies and clients will see the minimum tariff as, okay, I will just pay that and just leave me alone. But so if you do enforce such a strong agreement in your market for the self-employed, you always need to like discuss this with your members and make have a chance for them to come to you, ask your questions, because there are of course some doubts for self-employed people that have a very strong negotiation position. But in the end, the protection for the a bit weaker self-employed is greater than the loss for the top in the market. So in the end, everyone was okay with it. I'm not saying everyone was super happy with it, but for the most part, it was by far the larger part was happy with it because it kind of closed, put a floor in the market that you cannot go under anymore.
Yes, and I also hear again this word about solidarity. So solidarity between the employed and the self-employed.
Yes.
Also in the end for the self-interest in long term for the employed ones, but also
Exactly.
solidarity between the low and high earners within the sector.
Yeah, solidarity is basically a very important word in this whole project and this whole discussion that we do, because without solidarity, everyone for themselves. And our experience is that everyone from themselves is in the end good for only a few. And actually, you can make way more better working conditions if it's for the biggest part of the group. And that's in the end something that I think it's also the role of unions to kind of get this philosophy across on the workforce. And that's a big part of my job also to discuss this with your members and see how that works for everyone.
Yes, interesting. And also because in discussions around the gig economy, the problem is that's the working population is already heterogeneous populations of many different kind of people being dependent, not dependent, and which makes it hard to organize. But I think also the population of journalists is also quite diverse, and still you manage to create this kind of
Yeah,
of solidarity. Is it
yeah,
also
no,
something that's
absolutely.
also in the DNA of the sector?
Well, I must say what really helped, of course, in those modern times is like we use a lot of digital organizing as a union, and digital organizing is basically try to form communities in, for example, WhatsApp group or Signal group to get your message across. And that's really a big advantage of these times that you can like have quick and easy communications with large group and make like groups for each topic. Basically, we really use a lot of that. I'm like constantly on WhatsApp or Signal with groups discussing things about tariff or labor conditions. So that's a big plus. And at the same time, in journalism, there is a big solidarity because somehow we're all in the same boat together, and that is a strong feeling for everyone.
Hmm. Yes, it's interesting to hear.
Yeah, and also because yeah, you either work for this company or the other journalist company, so that makes also the minds of people aware that in this in such a like concentrated market, you need to not be an individual.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's also the core, of course, of organizing. But in the end, it's really important when in a market the supply is really fragmented and the demand is really concentrated. I think organizing is more important than ever these days. There's also one question from Cecily Mwangi. Um, I will read out here. My name is
Mhm.
Cecile Mwangi, General Secretary of Informal Workers in Hair and Beauty Industry in Kenya. And Watford is to lobby for normalization of informal industries for enforcement of labor laws and local government bylaws. Maybe Cecily, do you maybe want to to give some more background about your question or your contribution? We don't
We
hear.
don't hear you, Cicely.
No, we don't hear you.
We don't hear you.
Yes, you're unmuted, but maybe your microphone is not selected in the.
Um, but
No, it
no.
doesn't.
Oh, unfortunately, we don't hear you, Cicely.
But I think I do understand your question, and feel free to come in when it's when you can fix the microphone. Um, but I recognize, Cecily, in your written contribution that you will try to get this group of workers into formal institutional environments where things are being arranged for workers. What I think is really important. So I
Yes,
think
and
the
I want to add to that, it's really great that you lobby for the normalization of the informal industries because I can imagine that it is a long road, that you're maybe the end is not near, but eventually things will change. And sometimes it takes like a million small steps to eventually get to to the right enforcement of a labor law. So I think it's never a waste of time to take those million small steps that we need to take.
Yes, I agree, and I can understand that's normalization of informal industries is also really a big power battle of people with big stakes that want to stop that. So thanks, Cecily. So if your audio works later on this, then we can have discussion further. But for here, Milen, I want to thank you for your contribution. And we'll get back to you also in some minutes because we have about half an hour left. So thank you very much for
Thank
this,
you so
these
much.
insights.
I'll stay here, yeah.
Yes, good. And now I want to go to Paulien Osse.
Can you hear me now? No.
Now I hear you.
I wanted to contribute.
Yes.
What I'm just saying, first of all, organizing informal workers is a major challenge because, first of all, they do not see the need of being organized.
Mm.
The ones who dare to organize them, they are now saying that we're exposing them to taxation, or now we are exposing to the local authority personnel to be harassing them. So, so my question would be, how can we try to help them so that at the end of the day they will be covered by social protection? Because these workers are paid on commission, and they are not covered by the social protection schemes. Thank you. That is my question.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And I do also recognize this fear of organizing, formalizing, because then also all duties on, let's say, taxes and these kind of stuff also then apply. So maybe Paulien, do you have some thoughts on this question before I introduce you, of course?
Yeah, so what I would say the most important thing is that you have stamina. That sounds maybe, let's say, boring, but you start. What Milen has been explaining already before, but what happened in the journalist union, I started the end of the 80s to do the same. So to get for freelance journalism a floor in the system, and took let's say another 20 years, 25 years. So that's the same in Kenya. So you start, you don't give up, you keep on doing this, and it is I would say worldwide, step by step, a bit more common to talk about that self-employed people also need social security, pension, a reasonable income, and so let's say the good part is on our side, but it's a strong fight. So that's what I can say.
Thank you very much.
But we are together.
On this long journey.
Okay, so thank you for this. Also, Paulien, for your answer. So, Paulien, so I will introduce you now. So you're a former journalist yourself, and also the co-founder of the WageIndicator Foundation.
Yeah.
You're the global leader of Living Wages, and also the inventor of the Living Tariff methodology, which is a methodology to calculate a minimum hourly tariff for self-employed workers based on the cost of living approach of the living wage methodology. I think it also has quite some similarities. What I see is many of those floors are all based from the employment floor, and then we're going to look, okay, how can we also apply this on the self-employed? So my first question is, so you have extensive experience in calculating minimum tariffs, but also ensuring that the figure makes also an impact. Or maybe to start first, can you explain what the living tariff is for self-employed?
Well, let's start with let's say minimum wage. Most of the people know what a minimum wage is because most of the countries in the world have a minimum wage. A minimum wage is a kind of a floor you should not pay below. But minimum wage is very often only for those people who have a boss, or let's say for formal sector or for employees. and which in the end means that the concept of minimum wage is known, but it's not known for self-employed, for freelancers, because then sometimes, as Milen also said, then they are seen as an entrepreneur or even as a multinational, and because of that they have to compete with each other to, well, compete to death. So therefore, I think step by step you need a floor, and that floor needs, by definition, it needs to be higher than a minimum wage. Let's say, take the situation not from the journalists, but from cleaners, for instance. If a normal tariff for a cleaner, let's say a cleaner who's not formalized, so a cleaner comes and cleans your house, then the hourly tariff might be 10. Then some people think that it can be even 8 or 9 euro. And we would say if it's 10, if that is the level, then if you do it good, to have a level which is good enough to create a pension, to have a bit of unemployment position, to have a bit of leave, then from 10, it might be 17 or 20 even. So you easily might double the tariff. That is what we see in quite a lot of countries. We work now in 7 countries. We have a living tariff formally, but informally we calculated it for 185 countries. Of course, it's different per country because it depends a bit on the social security rules. But in general, at least 30% more, and very often 100% more. And so it needs to be more. As a floor, and of course above the floor it is someone is very good or has a skill nobody else had, so that's a different story. But this is about life and death, and living wage and minimum wage is always about life and death. It's about the first step, and after that you can see how you get some more. And to get the first step and to make sure that you get it, of course it's not easy. But we have quite some experience now in how to get it.
Yes, and it also takes time. But I think what we are every time in that. So maybe also good to give a bit of feeling about the living tariff. What you say, okay, it needs to be more. But in the methodology, it's quite sophisticated in. So what are then the aspects that need to be added to this? Maybe you can.
Of course, yeah. First, you always start first with your cost of living. I mean, that's the same concept as with living wage or living pension or living income. First is the cost of living. So what do you need as a person or as a family not to die in a certain region in the world? For these living costs, let's say cost of living / living wages, we did our calculations. Then, so that's your first step. On top of that, you have social security. Social security, if you talk only about living wage, then you assume that partly it's done by the employer, like employers paying a bit of tax, employers paying a bit of social security or pension. But when you are self-employed, you don't have an employer, which means all social security, all taxes need to be paid by you, which means you need to include them in your living tariff. If you don't have that included, then you say, oops, but I had to pay tax. Or many people in the world say, but these informal people or these freelancers, they don't pay tax, which is absurd, because then basically you say that half of the working population in the world is not paying tax or should not pay tax, which is, part of the concept of working in a normal society is that people also pay tax. So self-employed should pay tax. Therefore, there should be in their living, let's say in their living tariff per hour, there should be tax included. Then, so these two are the most, I would say, the most crucial: cost of living and then social security. Then on top of that, of course, you have it for any different occupation. You have, let's say, occupational cost. And that depends. That could be just a laptop and internet connection for someone, for a journalist, but a journalist needs also a phone, for a journalist needs a car, etc. Then you assume that a journalist is working from home and that there is enough space in the home to do the work. So basically, if you talk about occupational costs, you can talk about much more. Think about the car for the taxi driver or the petrol for the taxi driver. So there are different items which make the occupational cost. They are for different groups of workers or employees or gig workers different. We calculate them for more or less 15 big groups of employees. No, let's say workers. We calculated that, but of course for a very unique occupation, you can't calculate it, and you have to do like this. And the occupational costs can be really different. So it can be, imagine a taxi driver with a taxi or a bus and a lot of petrol. That's much more than a journalist with a laptop and a chair.
Yeah. I think you also can see this here. So this graph shows, okay, so what is for a web designer, I think from a cost perspective, quite similar to a journalist, of course, not to a camera journalist, where you see the difference between, okay, so what is then the living wage and what is the living tariff, which also we use in discussions with people to say, okay, let's say the freelancer or the gig worker needs to earn a living wage, but then you see that living wage is not enough. And especially, of course, with occupations where the costs for equipment are really high. This is from a taxi driver. You see the difference between what then the living wage for this person should be and then what the living tariff should be for the self-employed. So I think it's really so that's also what I like in the
everything starts with a floor. And if you, so the principle, and that's why I'm so happy with the story of Milen, is the first step is a floor. And the floor you discuss together and you say, look, we decide together that our freelancers in whatever world, they will not die. And this is their floor. It's decency, it's dignity. It's not about, they are not able to negotiate. No, come on. It's needed.
Yeah, agree. And so also listening also to the story of Milen, but also your experience also with the living wage of setting wage floors, but also make sure that numbers make impact. So what do you take from the story of Milen, and also what of your own experience can you add to that?
Well, what we see, because during, let's say, over the last 8 years, we work with big firms to make sure that they use living wages. And living wage is the first step, of course, because then, let's say, if big multinationals say, yes, we want to pay a living wage throughout the world in all their locations.
One moment, Cecily, can you maybe mute your microphone? You're still...
Yeah, I don't see her.
Yeah, I see you here, but I think, or maybe Valeria, maybe you can. Thank you very much. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah. So what we do as WageIndicator, so we sell data sets to big multinationals who want to pay a living wage for their employees. And that sometimes it's 800,000 people or 200,000, a lot of people. And that is, of course, they start with their own workforce. Next up is that they say, yes, but what about contractors? What about freelancers? What about part-timers? What about interns? So they come with the extra or the other groups where they also have a bit of influence on the pay levels of these people. So then we discuss with them. We say, well, then maybe the living tariff is a solution or the living income is a solution. And there we make steps. So that is a step to come again from, let's say, multinationals in quite a lot of countries are stronger than many governments. That is pity enough. And sometimes they have more morale than the government, I would say. So then step by step, you can influence to say, well, it's living wage is a concept, but living wage and living tariff is a concept together. It's part of the same idea, because people, if they are not employed but self-employed, then they also need to have a floor, because it's pointless to squeeze them out to let them die. So there, step by step, we make traction, and to do that from the strongest part is obviously easier than to go from the weakest part of a handful of freelancers who say, well, I want more. But you do it from the strongest part. At the same time, you team up with the ILO, or we team up with the ILO to focus on having a pay floor in the self-employed or gig workers situation as well. So that is where we have to go together. But to start with strong helps more to benefit for the weak. Mm-hmm. Is my experience. Well, I've been a self-employed journalist for many years. I started with an income of 2 or 3 euros or so. So it was, of course, you could not live from it. So from that situation, that period, I know that it's unfair. So it needs to be changed.
Mm-hmm. And also with calculating the living tariff, you also know that you also always have a kind of an imperfect number, especially because of the floor that is between the living wage and living tariff has many points to discuss. Let's say with waiting time. So how do you deal with those insecurities? It's just a practical approach about, okay, now we have something, so that's also the starting position for negotiations, or how do you look to that?
Well, the long-standing experience now in the living wage discussion, you have people who like to discuss ongoing how to measure the price of an apple or whatever, a sausage or whatever. So they keep on discussing how to improve the method. The longer you discuss how to improve the method, the longer people who need your calculation don't get anything, because they wait for your discussion. So in short, start, and a number never will be perfect because numbers change. They change because cost of living is changing, because you have inflation, you have war zones. If you see what happened over the last 4 or 5 days because of the war in Iran, the effect is that we can see that prices are going up. That companies come to us and say, do you think we still need to do 100% living wage compliant, etc.? So it's, of course, it's always in discussion. But if you don't start and don't want to improve, you're never anywhere. So then you're nowhere. Imperfection is part of life, and I think it's very good that it's part of life.
Yes, agree. And that's so what you say. I think what was really strong about, so every minute that you discuss the numbers, you don't make any impact for the workers that are waiting for the numbers, and also the importance of the cost of living base calculation, especially when the cost of living, but also of working changes. Let's say. Also within the current situation in the world, of course.
But of course, I realize very well that somebody who has a working time, that 50% of your work is waiting, and in that time that you wait, you don't get anything, that it's a very difficult part to negotiate about, of course. Mm-hmm. That's understood. And you can't say, look, I've been waiting here for 50%, so I need a double salary. That so then it's, of course, you can improve. You can say in some jobs it might be good to be employed. So that's for gig workers, and might be a solution. But look, in journalism, there is a hell of a lot of working time or waiting time. There is a hell of a lot of reading time, and the more you can read faster, the more you earn. It's fucking unfair all the time. So the essence is at least to have enough to survive, and not to keep on talking on 2 minutes extra working time or whatever, because then these discussions are there between people who have a perfect job, and they talk with people who have no job or only waiting time. And then you say, well, but it should be less. So it's just, it feels unfair. It is unfair. And that unfairness needs to be changed, and it can be changed. That's what we prove every day. And Milen is doing the same.
So Milen, maybe you can also join the spotlights. Valeria, if you can also add Milen. Because we have 10 minutes left, please also for the audience, if you have any question, thoughts, experience want to share, please also put it in the chat or open your mic and make some noise. And then, here. We have one question. Hey, Juliana, good to see you here. PhD researcher at Tilburg Law School. I think Milen, maybe Valeria, can you also spotlight Milen if your Zoom also, because Valeria has some troubles with Zoom. I don't think I can spotlight you, right? No, but okay, we continue and we'll see what happens. So the question from Juliana is to Milen. You mentioned that you encounter certain legal obstacles in the process of reaching the tariff. What main legal challenges would you say persist to this day? In your view, which legal obstacles are the most important to address going forward? For example, for lobbying for legislative reform. Milen, can you share your experience on this? And first, unmute yourself.
Yes, unmuted. Well, when we started the discussions, the biggest obstacle was that you couldn't make tariff agreements for the self-employed. But through lobbying, we lifted that ban. But that took some time. And so I think also on a European level, that ban was lifted. So because that was in the beginning the biggest obstacle, that self-employed people couldn't make agreements on tariff together because it was seen as a cartel. I don't even know the word in English. Cartel, that you make a cartel together. I don't know the English word, but that was the biggest obstacle in the beginning, but that got lifted through lobbying and also on the European legislative level, it got lifted. And I think now we have the discussion a little bit if you make an agreement under tariff or for the self-employed, is that maybe a form of fake employment? So that we see now makes clients and companies a bit wary on tariff agreements, that they think, with a stronger enforcement of fake employment, schijnzelfstandigheid, it's called in the Netherlands. What does this mean if we make an agreement on the tariff? So we see there's always a need to explain the laws in the advantage for the self-employed, because there's always discussion about making agreements for the self-employed if you're a union or an organization that make agreements for it is something that's not like really in the nature of labor laws to make agreements for the self-employed, and that luckily has changed, but it was a battle.
Good to hear. Yeah, and I also recognize this problems, but also many people that are using the excuse of competition law of not doing things because it's not allowed. But maybe you should first validate with the workers if they think it's interesting before you go into the technical details. Because luckily for this time, enforcement is also quite lacking. So maybe we can benefit one time from a lack of enforcement in that. Paulien, do you maybe have some questions to Milen or some things you think? Okay, this what really stood by you?
Well, it is something which is a bit a parallel discussion in terms of paying a living wage around the world. Then we said, well, it's a good idea to group all our clients in certain sectors together and then discuss in the sector. So then it's not in the sector in the Netherlands, but it's in the sector worldwide. Let's say, so all chemicals or all pharmaceutics together. And so we did that. So we discussed together. That's still going on, by the way. And in these group discussions, which are obviously behind closed doors, because as soon as a journalist would come in, then they would all shut their mouths and say, well, sorry, but this is not for you. So within these groups, of course, you have companies who say, I can't join because it's not allowed to make such a deal. But there are others who say, what the heck? We work on living wages as well together now. And there are directives from the EU who say we should pay a living wage. So there is nothing against it. So it's each time those who find an argument not to do something, they anyway didn't want to do it. So let them go, I would say. So we had that. So you have that experience, and it's part of the experience that to fight for fairness takes a while. I would say it's more that experience, and as soon as you have, let's say, more people who are on your side, it's easier to fight. It's easier to go on. In general, I would say at this moment, even when you have the, let's say, the problems because of the tariff war from Trump, even then we see that step-by-step companies are fighting for a living wage and fighting for a living tariff. So, of course, it's not an easy battle. But it happens.
Yes. Yeah, I agree completely, Paulien.
And the trade union is doing this. I think it's brilliant. It should be done every day by a trade union. I think it's great.
Yeah, super. I see a question from Dan de Vries, and he says, which is an interesting point. He says in the chat that the upcoming legal presumption that with an hourly rate below 38 euro, you deemed employees. Yes, Dan. This is definitely going to help the very bottom of the working force, because there is still a minimum tariff in journalism that is below that number. So we see the ultimate negotiation position now for us is to get the minimum tariff at least to 38 euros an hour and counting, because I think our hourly rate is going up with
indexed.
It's going to be indexed twice a year. So yes, I think this is a very good step actually from the government because it will help the lowest paid self-employed because they get a stronger position.
Was it part of the negotiation for you at NVA? This has been in the works for, I think, 5 years or so ish, maybe 3. In any case, I actually sometimes I work as a legal advisor, and sometimes I give the advice like pay at least this minimum tariff, because otherwise you may still have an issue, but you're definitely gonna have an issue if you don't pay it.
Yes, definitely. We did actually lobby through the trade union system of lobbyists for this tariff. And the good thing about this hourly rate, what we also did lobby for, is to make sure that you include the non-billable hours for a self-employed. So that's why this hourly rate of 38 is for a lot of self-employed actually higher than they're getting paid now. So it's a step forward. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for that. Also, down for your question. I think it's 1 minute before we go to close. So there's also a last question from Gabrielle, where he's also saying, okay, so in the end, so collective agreements might be an effective way, which also the case, of course, from Milen shows. Unfortunately, this is still a topic rarely addressed in CBAs. So Gabrielle, he's also responsible for the collective agreement database of WageIndicator. So if you have any relevant CBAs, so collective agreements that also include this minimum tariff for freelance workers or freelance workers in general, please also share. Maybe Gabi, maybe you can also add your email address here so people know how to contact you. And then I would like to close by first thank the speakers, so Milen and Paulien, for your contribution in the discussion that would take another 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 hours. So I think it was really interesting what we discussed. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Applause for
Good.
Milen. Very
Oh,
good.
Thank you. Thank
No,
you, guys.
what you did was very good.
And so you will receive end of this week, begin next week, after event newsletter where we also share also the recording of the webinar, but also a blog about this webinar. And in 2 months we will organize a new one, which we will also invite you for. And so we are also working on a position paper for the International Labour Conference on this topic. So also feel free to contact us when you have interest in contributing or when you want to endorse also a living pay for all workers, because that's also the topic we're going to address within this living pay documents. And if you have any other questions also about the living tariff, please feel free to contact. So I would thank you all, and I would say enjoy your day. See you next time.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gaat goed hoor.
Yes, I will also share.
Bye.
See, do you also have Gabri's email address here? No.
And Marcus is also there.
For the ones who are still here and want to send something to Gabri, I'll just email the rest over here.
Mhm.
So if you have any examples of other collective agreements that include self-employed workers and pay for self-employed workers, please feel free to share them with them, so we can also add them to our database, which is being used for research on collective agreements for workers. So thank you very much. So I think, Valeria, if you can close the room, if your Zoom allows you to, then you can close. And else, I have no idea how we can stop this room.
Well, my Zoom has all kind of things as well. Sometimes I just close the computer and switch off electricity.
Just
Oh,
unplug your internet connection.
And
Vale, can you make me host if it doesn't work?
And nothing works.
no, that is the problem.
Her screen was freezed.
Yeah.
But everybody's leaving.
Okay, well done. Nice. I like it. It's, let's say, short, concise. That's the best. It's
Yes.
if it blah 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 blah. It's very good.
Cool.
In this case, it's just a nice case, huh?
Meanwhile, Paulien, we have a next meeting with word clouds.
Yeah. Well, I can. We have, and can we have it in this group, or is it in my
it's
room?
a different link, and Mer is already in there. But I can share the link with Martijn, and he can hop in.
No, because I need to go to pick up my kids from school.
Okay.
Doing some unpaid labor.
Come on. This is love. This is love.
Yes, it is.
I would say as soon as a man comes and says it's unpaid labor, then I would say, but you need
See
to
you
give
in the
some
other
love.
meeting. Thank you. Well done.
Bye-bye.
Sorry, I'm a bit an activist now.
No, I know. Cannot happen.
I wasn't so prepared today for all the details. I hope it was not too superficial.
No, it was good, and it also really helped that I also had my slides here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it was nice to do.
Yeah. No. Okay, so we switch off and we go to the other room. See you, Irina.
She's already there.
Okay, I'm back. Okay.
Thank you very much. You're back.
No, so sorry. It was afraid that I would mess it up. So next time I'll make you co-host. So
yes, that's lesson. So if you can stop the recording, because I don't know what will happen if you close it directly.